I was adjusting my tie in the hallway mirror when my 8-year-old grandson Tommy tugged at my sleeve. His small face was pale, his eyes wide with something that looked like fear. "Grandpa," he whispered, glancing nervously toward the dining room where laughter echoed off the walls. "You need to leave. Now." The words hit me like ice water. Here I was, standing in my daughter Sarah's pristine home on Christmas Eve, surrounded by the warm glow of family tradition. And my grandson was telling me to run. The turkey was carved, the wine was poured, and 23 relatives had gathered around a table that groaned under the weight of holiday abundance. Yet, something in Tommy's voice made my blood freeze. I knelt down to his level, my knees creaking against the hardwood floor. "What's wrong, buddy? Did something happen?" Tommy's eyes darted toward the kitchen, where I could see my daughter Sarah moving between the stove and counter with mechanical precision. Her husband Derek stood beside her, his hand resting on her lower back in a gesture that looked loving from a distance. But Tommy's next words shattered that illusion completely. "They put something in your food, Grandpa. I saw Mommy do it when she thought no one was looking." The world tilted sideways. I gripped Tommy's shoulders, not hard, but firm enough to ground myself. "What kind of something, Tommy? Are you sure?" He nodded, tears starting to well in his eyes. "The white powder from Daddy's briefcase. The same stuff that made Grandma Betty sleep forever." My heart stopped. Grandma Betty, Derek's mother, who had passed away just 6 months ago after a sudden illness that had baffled doctors. The woman who had been asking too many questions about Derek's business dealings. The woman who had threatened to go to the police about financial irregularities she'd discovered in Derek's construction company. I looked at my grandson's face, so young, so innocent, yet carrying the weight of something no child should ever have to see. In that moment, every instinct I'd developed over 72 years of life screamed that he was telling the truth. "Tommy," I whispered, "I need you to do exactly what I say. Can you do that for Grandpa?" He nodded solemnly. "Go back to the dining room, act normal, laugh at Uncle Mike's jokes. Don't let anyone know we talked. Can you do that?" Another nod. "Good boy. I'm going to step outside for some air, and then I'll figure out what to do next." I stood slowly, my mind racing. 23 people in that dining room, my children, their spouses, cousins, aunts, uncles, people I'd known for decades, people I'd helped raise money for when times were tough. People who'd cried at my wife Margaret's funeral 5 years ago. And somewhere among them, my daughter and her husband had just tried to poison me. I walked toward the dining room with legs that felt like they belonged to someone else. The scene before me looked like a Norman Rockwell painting. Aunt Helen was telling a story about her cat getting stuck in the Christmas tree. My son Michael was refilling wine glasses with a smile that reached his eyes. Children ran between the adults' legs, their laughter mixing with the soft jazz playing from hidden speakers. Sarah looked up as I entered, her face brightening with what I now recognized as a performance. "Dad!" "There you are. Your plate's getting cold." I looked down at the chair they'd saved for me, right at the head of the table. A place of honor, the patriarch's seat. My plate sat there, perfectly arranged. Turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, green bean casserole. Steam still rose from the gravy. Everything looked normal. Everything looked perfect. Everything looked like a trap. "Just need some fresh air first," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "This old ticker isn't what it used to be." Derek's eyes sharpened almost imperceptibly. "You feeling all right, Jim? Maybe you should sit down, have some food. It'll make you feel better." The concern in his voice sounded genuine. If I hadn't just heard Tommy's warning, I would have been touched by my son-in-law's attention. Now, it sounded like the voice of a snake charmer. "Just a minute or two," I insisted, moving toward the French doors that led to the back patio. "Don't wait for me." I stepped outside into the December air, my breath forming clouds in the darkness. The patio was decorated with string lights and potted evergreens, creating a winter wonderland that should have filled me with joy. Instead, it felt like a stage set for my own funeral. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone. Who could I call? Who would believe me? A 72-year-old man accusing his own daughter of attempted murder based on the testimony of an 8-year-old child. The police would think I was losing my mind. My family would think the same thing. They'd probably start talking about nursing homes and diminished capacity and all the things that happen to old men who start seeing conspiracies in every shadow. But Tommy's face haunted me, the terror in his eyes, the way he'd glanced around to make sure no one was watching before he spoke to me. Children that age don't fabricate stories about poison. They don't understand the concept of murder well enough to lie about it convincingly. Through the French doors, I could see the family continuing their celebration. Sarah was cutting slices of pie now, her movements graceful and practiced. She caught my eye through the glass and waved, mouthing the words, "Come inside," with a smile that no longer looked maternal. It looked predatory. I waved back and pointed to my phone, indicating I was taking a call. She nodded and turned back to her pie cutting, but I noticed Derek saying something to her, his lips barely moving. She glanced back at me, and for just a moment, her mask slipped. I saw something cold and calculating in her expression, before the loving daughter facade snapped back into place. That look confirmed everything Tommy had told me. I walked to the far end of the patio, out of sight of the windows, and called the one person I trusted more than anyone else in the world. My brother Robert, a retired detective who'd spent 30 years with the Chicago Police Department. "Merry Christmas, Jim," he answered on the second ring. "How's the family gathering?" "Bobby," I whispered, "I need help. I think Sarah and Derek are trying to kill me." Silence on the other end, then, "Jim, are you drinking? You sound—" "I'm stone sober. Listen to me. Tommy warned me that they put something in my food, the same something that killed Derek's mother 6 months ago." Another pause. When Bobby spoke again, his voice had shifted into cop mode. "Where are you right now?" "On Sarah's back patio. The whole family's inside. They're waiting for me to come back and eat." "Don't go back inside. Don't eat anything. Don't drink anything. I'm 20 minutes away. Can you stay safe for 20 minutes? "I think so. But Bobby, what if I'm wrong? What if Tommy misunderstood something? What if—" "Jim." His voice was firm. "In 30 years of police work, I learned to trust my gut. If your gut is telling you to run, then run. We'll sort out the details later." The call ended, and I was alone with the December night and the terrible knowledge that my own daughter wanted me dead. But why? What could I possibly have done to deserve this? The answer came to me like a punch to the stomach. The will. The goddamn will. 6 months ago, after Derek's mother Betty died, I'd updated my will. Margaret and I had always planned to leave everything to our children equally. But after Betty's death, I'd started asking questions about Derek's business, the construction company that always seemed to be struggling, despite landing major city contracts. The offshore accounts Betty had mentioned before she died. The lifestyle that seemed too lavish for a small-time contractor. I'd hired a private investigator to look into Derek's finances. What he'd found had shocked me. Embezzlement, money laundering, bribery of city officials. Derek wasn't just a contractor. He was running a criminal enterprise with tentacles reaching deep into the city's infrastructure projects. I'd confronted Sarah about it 2 weeks ago. She'd denied everything, of course, said the investigator was mistaken, that Derek's success came from hard work and smart investments. But I'd seen the fear in her eyes. She knew I knew the truth, and now, apparently, she'd decided I was a threat that needed to be eliminated. The French doors opened behind me, and I turned to see Derek stepping onto the patio. He was carrying 2 glasses of wine, his smile as warm and genuine as ever. "Thought you might want some company," he said, offering me one of the glasses. "Sarah's worried about you. Says you've seemed stressed lately." I looked at the wine glass, its deep red contents reflecting the string lights above us. "Thanks, but I'm not drinking tonight. Doctor's orders." Derek's smile faltered for just a moment. "Come on, Jim. It's Christmas. 1 glass won't hurt." I said no. My voice was sharper than I intended, and I saw Derek's eyes narrow slightly. "Everything okay, Dad?" Sarah appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of concern. "You've been out here for 10 minutes. Everyone's asking about you." "Just needed some air," I repeated, backing toward the patio steps. "You know how stuffy these big family gatherings can get." Sarah stepped closer, and I noticed she was carrying my plate from the dining room. "I brought your dinner out. Thought you might want to eat while you're getting your air." The plate looked exactly as I'd left it, but now I could see what I'd missed before. A faint residue on the turkey, almost invisible unless you knew to look for it. A slight discoloration in the gravy that could have been shadows, but probably wasn't. "That's very thoughtful," I said, continuing to back away. "But I'm not hungry right now. Think I might be coming down with something." Derek moved to my left while Sarah moved to my right. Subtle positioning that would have looked casual to any observer. But to me, It felt like wolves circling their prey. "Dad, you really should eat something," Sarah pressed. "You haven't had anything since breakfast. It's not good for a man your age to go so long without food." A man my age. The words carried an undertone I didn't like, as if my age made me fragile, vulnerable, expendable. "You know what?" I said, forcing a smile. "I just remembered I need to stop by the pharmacy. Forgot to pick up my heart medication this morning. Mind if I slip out for a few minutes?" "On Christmas Eve?" Derek's voice carried a note of disbelief. "Everything's closed, Jim. Why don't you sit down, have some food, and we'll get your medication first thing tomorrow." "The 24-hour pharmacy on Maple Street," I lied smoothly. "They're always open. Won't take more than 15 minutes. I was at the patio steps now, freedom just a few feet away. But Sarah moved to block my path, her face still wearing that mask of loving concern. "Dad, I really think you should stay. You don't look well? Maybe we should call Dr. Morrison, have him come take a look at you." The trap was closing. They weren't going to let me leave voluntarily, which meant I had two choices: submit to whatever they had planned or fight my way out of my daughter's backyard like a common criminal. That's when I heard the sound that saved my life. A car door slamming in the front driveway, followed by heavy footsteps on the front walkway. Bobby had made good time. "Expecting someone else?" I asked casually, though my heart was pounding so hard I was sure they could hear it. Sarah and Derek exchanged a look, a wordless communication that confirmed everything I'd suspected. They weren't expecting anyone else. This was supposed to be a closed event, a family Christmas that would end with the patriarch quietly passing away in his sleep after a lovely evening with his loved ones. The doorbell rang, its cheerful chime echoing through the house. From inside, I could hear my son Michael's voice saying he'd get it, followed by the sound of the front door opening. "Jim?" Bobby's voice boomed through the house. "You here, brother?" "Out back," I called, relief flooding through me like warm water. Sarah's face had gone pale. "Dad, who is that? Why is Uncle Bobby here?" "I called him," I said simply. "Told him I wasn't feeling well. Asked him to drive me home." Derek's mask slipped completely for just a moment, and I saw pure rage flash across his features before the concerned son-in-law expression snapped back into place. "That wasn't necessary, Jim. We could have driven you home." "I know," I said, moving past them toward the house. But Bobby was closer. Bobby appeared in the French doors, his cop's eyes taking in the scene with professional assessment. My brother had always been good at reading situations, and I could see him cataloging details. Derek's clenched fists, Sarah's pale complexion, my position near the patio steps as if ready to run. "Everything all right out here?" he asked mildly. "Fine," Sarah said quickly. "Just trying to get Dad to eat something. He's been acting strange all evening." Bobby's eyes met mine, and I gave him the slightest nod. He understood. "Well, Jim did mention he wasn't feeling great when he called. Maybe it's best if I take him home, let him rest." "On Christmas Eve?" Derek's voice carried just a hint of desperation. "Come on, Jim's family. This is where he belongs tonight." "Family takes care of family," Bobby said, his tone pleasant but with an underlying steel that came from decades of dealing with criminals. "And right now, taking care of Jim means getting him somewhere he can rest." I moved toward the house, giving Sarah's offered plate a wide berth. "Let me just say goodbye to everyone." "Actually," Bobby said, "why don't I do that for you? You look tired. Go ahead and get in my car. I'll make your excuses." It was a good suggestion, removing me from the situation while keeping Bobby as a witness to whatever happened next. I nodded and headed for the front door, aware that Sarah and Derek were following close behind. In the dining room, the family was still celebrating, unaware of the drama playing out in their midst. Tommy caught my eye as I passed through, and I winked at him. His small smile told me everything I needed to know about how brave he'd been tonight. The cold night air felt like freedom as I walked to Bobby's car. Behind me, I could hear him making smooth excuses to the family. "Food poisoning," he was saying. Jim wasn't feeling well, didn't want to spoil everyone's Christmas by being sick at the table. I got into the passenger seat and looked back at the house. Through the windows, I could see Sarah and Derek standing in the living room, their body language tense and angry. They were talking in low, urgent voices, probably trying to figure out how their plan had gone so wrong. Bobby emerged from the house a few minutes later, his face grim. He got into the driver's seat and started the engine without a word. "Well?" I asked as we pulled out of the driveway. "Well, your daughter and son-in-law are definitely up to something. The way they reacted when I said I was taking you home, that wasn't disappointment, Jim. That was panic." We drove in silence for several minutes before Bobby spoke again. "Tell me everything, from the beginning." I told him about Tommy's warning, about the white powder from Derek's briefcase, about Betty's mysterious death 6 months ago. I told him about the private investigator, about Derek's criminal enterprise, about the will that would leave everything to Sarah and her children. Bobby listened without interruption, his cop's mind processing the information and filing it away for future reference. "The boy," he said finally. "Tommy, you think he actually saw them put something in your food?" "I know he did. You should have seen his face, Bobby. That kind of terror can't be faked. Kids that age, sometimes they mix up reality and imagination. Not Tommy. He's always been sharp as a tack. And the way he described it, the white powder from Derek's briefcase, that's too specific to be make-believe." Bobby was quiet for another long moment. "What do you want to do about this, Jim?" It was a loaded question. What did I want to do? Turn in my own daughter for attempted murder? Destroy my family on Christmas Eve based on the word of an 8-year-old child? "I want to live," I said finally, "and I want to make sure Tommy stays safe. If they're willing to kill me to keep their secret, what happens to him now that he's seen too much?" Bobby's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "We need proof. Real evidence. Something more than a child's testimony." "The plate," I said suddenly. "Sarah brought my plate outside. If there really was something in the food, it might still be there. They've probably thrown it away by now, or washed it. These people aren't amateurs, Jim." But even as he said it, Bobby was turning the car around, heading back toward Sarah's house. We parked a block away and walked through the shadows toward the backyard. The Christmas party was still going strong. We could hear laughter and music through the windows. With any luck, Sarah and Derek would be too busy playing host and hostess to worry about cleaning up. The back gate was unlocked, and we slipped into the yard like thieves in the night. The patio was empty, but the plate Sarah had brought me was still sitting on the outdoor table, forgotten in the chaos of my sudden departure. Bobby pulled out a small evidence bag from his coat pocket, old habits die hard for retired cops, and carefully scraped samples from the turkey and gravy into separate containers. "This is circumstantial at best," he whispered. "Even if there's poison in here, they'll claim it was accidental contamination. Food poisoning from improperly stored turkey." "What about Derek's briefcase? Tommy said that's where the white powder came from." "Breaking and entering, any evidence we find would be inadmissible." We were creeping back toward the gate when the French doors opened and Derek stepped onto the patio. He had his phone pressed to his ear, and his voice carried clearly in the cold night air. "No, it didn't work," he was saying. "The old man got suspicious and left before he ate anything. Yes, I know what this means for the timeline. We'll have to move to Plan B." Bobby and I froze behind a large evergreen shrub, barely breathing. "The kid saw something," Derek continued. "Sarah's questioning him now, but he's not talking. No, we can't just leave it alone. He knows too much." I said we'll handle it. Give us 48 hours. The call ended, and Derek stood on the patio for a long moment, staring out into the darkness. For a terrifying second, I thought he'd spotted us, but then he turned and went back inside. Bobby and I waited another 5 minutes before creeping back to his car. Once we were safely away from the house, Bobby pulled out his own phone. "Who are you calling?" I asked. "A friend at the lab. We need to know what's in that food, and we need to know tonight." The next few hours passed in a blur. Bobby's friend fast-tracked the lab analysis while we sat in a 24-hour diner, drinking coffee and trying to process what had just happened. At 3 a.m., Bobby's phone rang. "Potassium chloride," he said after ending the call. "Enough to stop your heart within minutes of ingestion. Tasteless, odorless, and damn near undetectable unless you know to look for it." I stared at my coffee cup, watching the steam rise in lazy spirals. My own daughter had tried to murder me with the same substance that had probably killed Derek's mother. The woman I'd raised, whose scraped knees I'd bandaged, whose nightmares I'd chased away, had looked me in the eye and offered me a plate of poison. "What's Plan B?" I asked. Bobby's expression was grim. From the sound of that phone call, "They're going to make it look like an accident, heart attack, stroke, fall down the stairs. something that won't require an autopsy. And Tommy? Kids have accidents too, Jim, especially kids who see things they shouldn't see. The thought of my grandson in danger was enough to cut through the numbness that had been protecting me. We have to do something. We have to get him out of there. We will, but we need to be smart about it. If we go charging in there, making accusations, they'll lawyer up and disappear. We need them to make a move, something that gives us concrete evidence of their intentions. You want to use me as bait. I want to give them enough rope to hang themselves. Bobby laid out his plan over the next hour. It was risky, maybe even reckless, but it was the only way to get the evidence we needed to put Sarah and Derek away for good. I would go back to my apartment and wait, let them think they'd successfully scared me off, that I was too confused and frightened to cause any more trouble. Eventually, they'd make their move, and when they did, Bobby would be ready. What about Tommy? I asked again. We'll have someone watching the house. If that boy is in immediate danger, we'll move. But Jim, you have to understand, if we tip our hand too early, we lose our chance to get justice for Betty's death too. This is bigger than just what they tried to do to you tonight. I understood the logic, but logic is a cold comfort when you're worried about your 8-year-old grandson. Still, Bobby was right. We needed to play this smart. I went home to my small apartment and tried to pretend that Christmas morning felt normal. I opened the gifts my grandchildren had given me earlier in the week, made myself breakfast, watched the parade on television. But every sound in the hallway made me jump. Every phone call sent my heart racing. Sarah called around noon, her voice sweet with manufactured concern. Dad, how are you feeling? Uncle Bobby said you had food poisoning last night. Much better, I lied. Just needed some rest. Sorry I had to leave so abruptly. Don't apologize. We were just worried about you. You seemed so confused yesterday evening. There was that word again. Confused. The first step in a campaign to make me seem mentally incompetent. Just tired, I said. This old body isn't what it used to be. Dad, Derek and I were talking, and we think maybe it's time to consider some additional support. You know, someone to help with shopping, cooking, making sure you're taking your medications properly. I'm managing fine on my own, Sarah. Are you, though? I mean, last night you seemed genuinely convinced that something was wrong with your food. That's not normal, Dad. That's paranoid thinking. And there it was. The beginning of the narrative that would justify whatever they did to me next. Jim was getting paranoid in his old age. Jim was having delusions. Jim wasn't competent to make his own decisions anymore. Maybe you're right, I said, playing along. Maybe I do need more help than I'm willing to admit. I could practically hear Sarah's smile through the phone. I'm so glad you're being reasonable about this. Derek knows someone, a very discreet company that provides in-home care for seniors. They could have someone there as early as tomorrow. That sounds wonderful, honey. You always know how to take care of your old dad. We chatted for a few more minutes about inconsequential things before hanging up. Within an hour, Bobby called to let me know that a van from Sunset Care Services had been spotted in my neighborhood, circling the block repeatedly. They're not wasting any time, he said. My contact at the department is running the plates now, but I'm betting this care service is just another front for Derek's operation. That evening, I got a knock on my door. Through the peephole, I could see a middle-aged woman in scrubs holding a medical bag and a clipboard. Mr. Henderson? I'm Nancy from Sunset Care Services. Your daughter arranged for me to stop by and do a wellness check. I opened the door, but left the chain latch in place. I wasn't expecting anyone tonight. Oh, I'm sorry for the confusion. Sarah said you'd agreed to start services tomorrow, but she wanted me to introduce myself and go over some paperwork tonight. It'll just take a few minutes. The woman's smile was professional and reassuring, but something about her eyes reminded me of Derek's cold calculation. I noticed she was wearing latex gloves, unusual for someone just doing paperwork. You know what? I'm pretty tired tonight. Could we do this tomorrow instead? Her smile faltered slightly. It really won't take long, Mr. Henderson. Just a quick assessment and some forms to sign. Your daughter is very concerned about you. I closed the door and fastened all the locks, my hands shaking. Through the peephole, I watched the woman stand there for several minutes before finally walking away. But instead of leaving the building, I saw her take out her phone and make a call. My own phone rang a few minutes later. Sarah again. Dad, Nancy said you wouldn't let her in. She's just trying to help. I don't need help tonight, Sarah. I'm fine. Dad, this is exactly what I was talking about. This paranoid behavior. Nancy is a registered nurse. She's there to make sure you're okay. And I'm telling you, I'm okay. I don't need a stranger in my apartment. There was a pause, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice had an edge to it. Dad, we're worried that you're not thinking clearly. Last night's episode, refusing help tonight? Derek thinks maybe we should talk to Dr. Morrison about having you evaluated. The threat was clear: submit to their care or be declared mentally incompetent. Let me sleep on it, I said. We can talk tomorrow. Fine, but Dad, Nancy's going to stay in the building tonight, just in case you change your mind. She'll be right down the hall if you need anything. The call ended, and I realized I was trapped. They had someone in the building, probably with keys and the authority to enter my apartment, for my own safety. Plan B was already in motion. I called Bobby immediately. They're here, I whispered. Some fake nurse. She's staying in the building tonight. Okay, Jim, listen carefully. Pack a small bag. Just essentials. In 15 minutes, I want you to trigger the fire alarm on your floor. When everyone evacuates, slip out with the crowd and meet me at the parking garage across the street. What about evidence? What about catching them in the act? They've moved up their timeline. We don't have the luxury of playing cat and mouse anymore. Right now, our priority is keeping you alive. I packed quickly. Medications, important documents, a change of clothes. At exactly 11:30 p.m., I pulled the fire alarm in the hallway. The shrill sound echoed through the building, and within minutes, residents were filing out of their apartments and heading for the exits. The fake nurse appeared in the hallway, looking annoyed and confused. She tried to get to my door, but the flow of evacuating residents carried her along toward the stairwell. I waited until she was out of sight, then slipped out of my apartment and joined the crowd heading down the emergency stairs. In the chaos of the evacuation, no one noticed one more elderly resident making his way to safety. Bobby was waiting in the parking garage as promised, his car running and ready to go. I climbed in, and we drove off into the night as fire trucks arrived at my building. Where are we going? I asked. Safe house. Friend of mine from the department. We'll regroup there and figure out our next move. We drove for about an hour before pulling into the driveway of a modest ranch house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Bobby's friend, a retired detective named Martinez, greeted us at the door. Jim, this is Tony Martinez. Tony, this is my brother Jim, the one I told you about. Martinez shook my hand with a grip that spoke of years of dealing with dangerous situations. Welcome to my home, Jim. You're safe here. The next few days passed in a strange kind of suspended animation. I was safe, but I was also cut off from my normal life. I couldn't go home, couldn't contact any of my family except through Bobby, couldn't even use my credit cards in case Derek was tracking my financial activity. Bobby kept me updated on the investigation. The fire department had found evidence of tampering with my apartment's gas line, a slow leak that would have built up over several days before reaching explosive levels. The accidental gas explosion would have looked like the tragic end of an elderly man who'd forgotten to turn off his stove. Meanwhile, Sarah had filed a missing persons report, claiming I'd wandered away from the building during the fire evacuation and hadn't been seen since. She went on local news pleading for my safe return, playing the role of the worried daughter to perfection. She's good, Martinez observed as we watched one of Sarah's tearful television interviews. If I didn't know better, I'd believe she was genuinely concerned. But Bobby had been busy building a case, the lab results on the food samples, Derek's phone records from Christmas Eve, financial records showing the flow of money through Derek's various shell companies, and most importantly, surveillance footage from my apartment building showing the fake nurse carrying what appeared to be tools for tampering with gas lines. On the fourth day, Bobby came to the safe house with news that changed everything. We got him, he said simply. Derek made a mistake. He used his personal credit card to pay for equipment that was used to tamper with your gas line. Amateur hour. My contact at the department is getting arrest warrants as we speak. What about Sarah? Bobby's expression was grim. The phone records show she was in contact with Derek throughout the planning stages. She's going down too. And Tommy? That's actually good news. Sarah's been so focused on the missing person charade that she hasn't had time to deal with the boy. He's been staying with his other grandmother, Derek's sister. She's apparently been suspicious of Derek for months and was happy to cooperate once we explained the situation. The arrests happened at dawn on December 30th. Bobby and I watched from an unmarked car as a team of detectives surrounded Sarah's house. Through the windows, we could see the confusion and panic as Sarah and Derek were taken into custody. Sarah's performance for the cameras as she was led away in handcuffs was Oscar-worthy. She screamed about being innocent, about being framed, about how her poor father was still missing, and the police were wasting time arresting the wrong people. But the evidence was overwhelming. Derek's business record showed years of embezzlement and money laundering. The private investigator I'd hired had provided detailed documentation of the criminal enterprise. Most damning of all, a search of Derek's office revealed a briefcase containing potassium chloride and detailed notes about dosages and methods of administration. Betty's body was exhumed and tested. The autopsy confirmed what we'd suspected. She'd been murdered with the same substance they had tried to use on me. The trial was a media circus. Sarah maintained her innocence throughout, claiming she'd been manipulated and controlled by Derek. She painted herself as another victim, a loving wife who'd been drawn into her husband's criminal activities without understanding the consequences. Derek, on the other hand, tried to cut a deal. He offered to testify against Sarah in exchange for a reduced sentence, claiming the murder plots had been her idea from the beginning. Neither strategy worked. The evidence was too strong, the pattern too clear. Sarah was sentenced to life without parole for conspiracy to commit murder. Derek got the same sentence, plus additional time for the financial crimes. Tommy testified in a closed session, his testimony carefully managed by child psychologists and victim advocates. His description of what he'd seen that Christmas Eve was heartbreakingly clear and detailed. The judge commended his bravery and ordered ongoing counseling to help him process the trauma of seeing his parents arrested. I was awarded custody of Tommy, along with his younger sister Emma, who'd been too young to understand what was happening around her. It wasn't the retirement I'd planned, becoming a single parent again at 72, but it was a responsibility I embraced gladly. The financial investigation revealed that Derek had stolen over $2 million from various city projects over the years. Most of it was recovered and returned to the city, but a significant portion had been spent on the lifestyle that had impressed so many people at family gatherings. The house where I'd almost been murdered was sold to pay restitution to Derek's victims. Sarah and Derek's other assets were liquidated as well. There was a certain poetic justice in watching their ill-gotten gains being distributed to the people they had stolen from. 6 months after the trial ended, Tommy and I were sitting in our new apartment, a bright, cheerful place near his school with good security and neighbors who looked out for each other. He was doing his homework at the kitchen table while I prepared dinner. Nothing fancy, just spaghetti and meatballs, but made with love and without any hidden ingredients. "Grandpa," Tommy said without looking up from his math worksheet, "do you ever miss Mommy?" It was a question he asked occasionally, and I always answered it honestly. "I miss the Mommy you thought she was," I said. "The Mommy who read you bedtime stories and helped you build pillow forts. But the person who tried to hurt Grandpa? I don't miss her at all." Tommy nodded solemnly. He was getting therapy to help him process everything that had happened, but he was a resilient kid. Emma, now 6, barely remembered the trauma of that Christmas Eve. To her, living with Grandpa was just another adventure. "Will Mommy ever come home?" Tommy asked. "No, buddy. Mommy made some very bad choices, and now she has to live with the consequences of those choices. But you know what? You have people who love you and will always take care of you. Uncle Bobby, Aunt Maria, all your cousins, and me, of course. And Emma. And Emma," I agreed with a smile. As I watched my grandson work on his homework, I thought about the chain of events that had led us to this point. If Tommy hadn't been brave enough to warn me that night, I would have died at that Christmas dinner table. Sarah and Derek would have inherited my estate, probably killed Betty's sister when she started asking questions, and continued their criminal enterprise until someone else finally stopped them. One 8-year-old boy's courage had saved multiple lives and brought justice to multiple victims. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. I looked through the peephole to see Bobby standing in the hallway with a grocery bag in his hands. "Uncle Bobby's here," I called to the kids as I opened the door. "Brought ice cream," Bobby announced, holding up the bag. "Thought we could celebrate Tommy's A on his spelling test." "How did you know about that?" Tommy asked, beaming with pride. "Grandpas have their ways of finding out about these things," Bobby said with a wink. As we sat around the table eating ice cream and listening to Tommy tell us about his day at school, I felt a deep sense of contentment, Not happiness exactly. Too much had happened for simple. Happiness, but contentment. Justice had been served. The children were safe. We were building a new life together, one day at a time. Later that evening, after the kids were in bed, Bobby and I sat on the apartment's small balcony, looking out over the city lights. "Any regrets?" Bobby asked. I thought about it for a long moment. I regret that Sarah made the choices she made. I regret that 2 children had to see their parents arrested. I regret that Betty died before we could save her. But do I regret trusting Tommy's warning that night? Not for a second. He's a good kid. They both are. They're everything to me now. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, 2 old men who'd seen too much but had lived long enough to see justice done. "You know what the strangest part is?" I said finally. "What's that?" For years, I felt guilty about not being a better provider for my family. Always worried I wasn't giving them enough, wasn't setting them up for success. Turns out, I was giving them too much. If I'd been poorer, Sarah might never have been tempted to kill me for my inheritance. Bobby chuckled darkly. "Money changes people, Jim. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. Sarah and Derek chose worse." I keep thinking about that Christmas dinner, how normal everything looked, how perfect the performance was. If Tommy hadn't warned me. But he did. That's what matters. That boy saw evil and chose to fight it, even though he was scared, even though it meant going against his own parents. That takes a kind of courage most adults never develop. I nodded, thinking about my grandson's bravery. At 8 years old, he'd saved my life, and probably his own. The thought of what Derek might have done to him if he'd realized Tommy had witnessed the poisoning attempt still gave me nightmares. "The therapy's helping him," I said. "Both kids, really. But especially Tommy. He was carrying so much guilt about getting mommy in trouble, as he put it. Kids always blame themselves. It's how their minds work. But he'll understand someday that he's a hero. He's already a hero. He just doesn't know it yet." The next morning was Saturday, and I'd promised to take the kids to the zoo. It had become our weekly tradition, something to look forward to, something normal in lives that had been turned upside down. Tommy was excited to see the new baby elephant that had been born the month before. Emma wanted to visit the butterfly garden, her favorite spot in the entire zoo. Simple pleasures, innocent joys that reminded me why I'd fought so hard to protect them. As we walked through the zoo gates, Tommy slipped his small hand into mine. "Grandpa," he said, "I'm glad you listened to me that night. I'm glad you were brave enough to speak up, buddy. Were you scared?" I considered lying, telling him that adults don't get scared, but I'd promised myself I would always be honest with these children. They'd seen enough deception for one lifetime. I was terrified, I admitted. But you know what? Sometimes being scared and being brave happen at the same time. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you do the right thing even when you are afraid. Tommy thought about this for a moment as we walked toward the elephant exhibit. "Is that why you believed me? Even though I'm just a kid?" "I believed you because you were telling the truth, and the truth is always worth listening to, no matter who's speaking it." We spent the morning watching elephants and feeding giraffes and laughing at the antics of the monkey house. For a few hours, we were just a grandfather and his grandchildren enjoying a beautiful day at the zoo. The darkness of our shared past didn't disappear, but it receded enough to let the light in. At lunch, as we sat at a picnic table sharing nachos and lemonade, Emma asked the question that had been on her mind for months. "Grandpa, why did Daddy and Mommy have to go away?" It was harder to explain to a 6-year-old than to an 8-year-old. Emma didn't fully understand concepts like poison and murder and criminal enterprises. She just knew that her parents had been taken away by police officers and now she lived with Grandpa. "Remember how we talked about good choices and bad choices?" I said gently. Emma nodded, her face serious. "Well, Mommy and Daddy made some very bad choices. They hurt people, and when people hurt others, they have to go to a special place where they can think about what they did wrong." "Like time out?" "Yes, sweetheart, like a very long time out." "Will they say sorry and come home?" My heart broke a little at the hope in her voice. "No, baby. This time out is forever. But you know what? You have Tommy and me, and we love you so much. We're going to take care of you and keep you safe and help you grow up to be a wonderful person who makes good choices." Emma seemed satisfied with this explanation and returned to her nachos. Tommy caught my eye across the table and gave me a small nod of approval. He understood the delicate balance of telling the truth while still protecting his sister's innocence. That afternoon, as we watched the sea lions perform their tricks, my phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. For a moment, my blood ran cold. Old habits from those terrifying days when I'd been in hiding. But when I opened the message, I saw it was from Maria, Derek's sister, who had been caring for the children during the immediate aftermath of the arrests. "Saw you on the news last night," the message read. "Tommy looked so happy. Thank you for giving them a good life. I'd done an interview with a local news station about elder abuse and the importance of listening to children when they report suspicious behavior. Tommy had insisted on being in the interview with me, wanting people to know that kids could be heroes too. I texted back, "They're giving me a good life too. Thank you for everything you did to help them." It was true. Taking care of Tommy and Emma had given my life purpose and meaning in a way I'd never expected. After Margaret died, I'd felt like I was just marking time, waiting for my own end. Now, at 73, I felt like I was starting over. That evening, as we sat in our living room, Tommy doing homework, Emma coloring, me reading the newspaper, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought us to this point. A year ago, I'd been a lonely widower with grown children who saw me mainly as an obligation. Now, I was a single parent again, responsible for 2 young lives that depended on me completely. The irony wasn't lost on me. Sarah had tried to kill me for my money, and in doing so, she'd ensured that every penny I had would go to the children she'd lost the right to raise. Justice has a sense of humor sometimes. "Grandpa," Tommy said, looking up from his math homework, "Mrs. Johnson wants to know if you can come to school next week for career day." Mrs. Johnson was Tommy's teacher, a kind woman who'd gone above and beyond to help him adjust to his new circumstances. What would I talk about? I'm retired. "You could talk about being a hero," Tommy suggested seriously. "I'm not a hero, buddy. You're the hero in this family." "We could both be heroes," Emma chimed in from her spot on the floor. "Like in the movies." I laughed, charmed by her logic. "You know what? Maybe Mrs. Johnson would let us do it together. We could talk about how families protect each other." Tommy's face lit up. "Really? You'd let me help?" "Of course. You're the one who saved Grandpa after all." As I watched my grandchildren's faces glow with excitement at the prospect of sharing their story, I felt a deep sense of gratitude for the chain of events that had led us here. Not gratitude for the tragedy. I would never be thankful for Sarah's choices or Derek's crimes, but gratitude for the resilience of the human spirit, for the courage of children, for the possibility of healing and starting over. Tommy had whispered those crucial words, "Leave now," on a Christmas Eve that should have been my last. Instead, it became the first day of a new life for all of us. A life built on truth instead of lies, on genuine love instead of manipulation, on the kind of courage that speaks up even when it's dangerous to do so. That night, as I tucked the children into their beds, Tommy asked me one more question. "Grandpa, do you think Mommy ever really loved us?" It was the hardest question he had ever asked me, and I took a long moment to consider my answer. "I think your mommy loved the idea of having children," I said finally. "But real love means putting the people you love before everything else, even yourself. And she didn't do that. But you do." "I try to, buddy, every single day. I love you, Grandpa. I love you too, Tommy, more than all the stars in the sky." As I turned off the light and closed his bedroom door, I thought about the different kinds of love that existed in the world. There was the possessive love that Sarah had shown, love that was really about control and ownership. There was the conditional love that Derek had offered, love that existed only as long as it served his purposes. And then there was the love I felt for Tommy and Emma, unconditional, protective, willing to sacrifice anything for their well-being. It was the same love I'd once felt for Sarah, before she'd chosen greed over family, before she'd decided that money was more important than the man who'd raised her. The children were safe now. They were healing. They were learning that love didn't have to come with conditions or hidden agendas. They were discovering that family wasn't just about blood relations. It was about people who chose to care for each other, who chose to tell the truth even when it was difficult, who chose to listen when someone they loved whispered a warning in the dark. As I settled into my own bed that night, I thought about Tommy's courage one more time. An 8-year-old boy had looked into the face of evil and refused to be silent. He'd risked everything to save his grandfather, not knowing that in doing so, he was also saving himself and his sister. That's the kind of hero the world needs more of. Not the flashy, larger-than-life heroes of movies and television, but the quiet heroes who speak up when it matters, who choose truth over convenience, who protect the people they love even when it's scary. Tommy had whispered, "Leave now," and changed everything. Sometimes the most powerful words are the quietest ones, spoken by the smallest voices, in the darkest moments. I closed my eyes and drifted off to sleep, grateful for grandsons who pay attention, for brothers who answer midnight phone calls, for the possibility of justice in an often unjust world. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new adventures, new opportunities to build something good from the ashes of tragedy. But tonight, we were safe. We were together. We were home. And that was enough. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, if something feels wrong, trust your instincts. If a child tries to warn you about danger, listen to them. And never underestimate the power of speaking truth in the face of evil, no matter how scary it might be.